everybody, and welcome to Call of Duty World War II. The 2017 installment of Call of Duty, developed by Sledgehammer Games. Here we are on Omaha Beach, participating in the D-Day landings of Operation Overlord, the Allied operation that was the invasion of Normandy. We are standing in an LCVP, also called a Higgins boat. And these are the iconic landing boats that troops would arrive on shore with, guarded by a steel landing ramp, which would drop down into the surf, and then the soldiers would have to, in just a startling display of bravery, have to charge off of the boat and onto the beaches, overseen by German machine gun nests. And the landings at Normandy is one of the most famous moments of World War II. It was not always going to happen this way, however. There were multiple options that the Allies considered for where they would begin their invasion of Hitler's burgeoning empire. Normandy was one choice, but another beach to the east was the Pas de Calais, and the choice between these two locations was a major decision for the Allied forces. One of the most remarkable deception operations in the whole war, in my opinion, although there were a few great deception operations, was Operation Bodyguard, which was an intricate plan to trick the Germans into believing that the invasion would happen at the Pas de Calais. Operation Bodyguard accomplished this with double agents, fake tanks and aircrafts made of inflatable material, and George Patton, the famous U.S. general, also commanded a fake U.S. Army group. It was called FUSAG, the first U.S. Army group. And it was just made up of reserves and backup soldiers who were never actually intended to go into combat, at least not in the near future. But they were stationed in the south of England, along with those inflatable tanks and stuff that I mentioned, so that German reconnaissance aircraft would see what looked to be a massive army grouping up across across the channel from the Pas-de-Calais. This map, by the way, is it's an attack and defend game mode, where the allies have to storm the beach. And there's some cool little interactions you can do on the map. Like the Germans can build those brick walls that I just built. And the Allies can place explosive charges to blow them up. But there are other interactable sections of the map. Like the Allies can build ladders to climb their way up into the German bunkers. And there's, here, look at this long pole. This is called a Bangalore bomb. A Bangalore torpedo, that's what it is. And it's a long metal pole with an explosive attached to it that allows people to detonate mines or other hazards, such as the barbed wire that we just blew up, from a safe distance. And you see that I just built a ladder that allows us entrance into Bunker B. Wir kämpfen für die Sicherheit unseres Volk, für unseren Lebensraum. So I don't speak German, but I think Volk is people. So that seems to be a sort of inspirational poster or something. Because, oh yeah, check this out. The defenders have access to these heavily guarded machine gun emplacements, so the defenders have a lot of advantages. But that poster also referenced Lebensraum, which is, in German it means living space. And it's kind of a famous concept because the German desire for living space, the belief that their people needed substantially more land if they were going to thrive as a people, was one of the major arguments that Hitler made for why Germany had to go to war. And of course, even before the war began, Germany took various pieces of land, for instance in the Anschluss, and it was largely motivated by this argument for Lebensraum. There seems to be some kind of warning about explosive munitions. But anyway, I just captured Bunker B. So the first objective in this game mode, and this game mode is called War, by the way. Here, let me also show you that you can blow up these brick walls here. Kaboom. So yeah, the game mode of war takes place over a series of objectives, and the attackers have to complete their current objective within a certain amount of time, or else the defenders win. And if the attackers are successful, then they move on to another objective. So, in this map, the first objective for the Allied forces is to capture these 2 beach bunkers, which we have just done. And next is to advance and destroy the comms equipment found in a German bunker up ahead, so we'll go check that out, but we'll take one last look at Omaha Beach before we go. And my understanding is that Omaha Beach was probably the most brutal beach landing zone of D-Day. The defensive advantage held by the Germans made it a bloodbath for the advancing Americans. And I believe it was only when most of the other landing zones had advanced into, had secured a foothold on the beaches that eventually Omaha Beach came under Allied control as well. So, here is our second objective location. Another German bunker with various quotes on the wall, holes to fire out of at the oncoming Americans, munitions in crates, and in here we have the communications equipment. So I'm gonna light these up with a flamethrower, but it occurs to me that my loadout is not very suited for destroying all of these. So I think I'm going to have to swap over. And I have destroyed the communications equipment, and I'll just cut that out so that we can continue moving forward and explore more of the map. And this map, by the way, is called Operation Neptune, which was the code name for the naval component of D-Day. So here we've worked our way inland past the front lines of the German defenses, and there are 2 artillery guns that we have to take out in order to win the match. So we can make our way through this French home with a very small, cute little piano here. No doubt a children's toy of some kind, or built for a child. We can can also see a scooter, so this may have been a child's bedroom at one point. Though now it is nothing but rubble. And you have to plant 3 bombs on the artillery guns back here. And again, the Germans can erect defenses, so here we have the ability to build some barbed wire. But then the Allies have the ability to place another Bangalore torpedo, often just called bangers, and destroy the barbed wire defenses. So we can place one of these bombs here, and the enemy can try to defuse it quickly. But if the timer in the top left fills up, then the bomb explodes. And I won't go through the process of planting all these bombs, so I think we will wrap up our exploration of Operation Neptune here. Welcome to Shipment 1944. So this is a remake of the famous map Shipment, the fan favorite, tiny little chaotic map, which appeared in Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. And I think they did a beautiful job with remaking this map. It is a landing area in Normandy after the Allies successfully gained their foothold. And there is so much lush environmental design to look at. These are very cool. Those floating balloons are called barrage balloons. And those were anti-air hazards. They were a defensive measure. The balloons are unmanned, and they were sent up into the sky attached to steel cables. And what that meant was that any aircraft that attempted to attack the area in which the barrage balloons were floating would be at risk of crashing into either the balloons themselves or the steel cables hanging from them and attached to the ground. Now, what this meant in practice was that, oh, this is cool, by the way, red ball convoys only. Oh, and look at that, there's people walking off in the distance. I mean, I just love this map. I think it's beautifully designed. Red ball convoys were it was the supply line sent in from the Normandy beachheads. So, supplies would land at Normandy, and they would be put on trucks, and they would be sent east, deeper into France. And this became increasingly important well, or maybe I should say remained important as the war progressed and as the Allies pushed farther east. Because as the Germans retreated, they would destroy port towns and port cities. And this meant that it was very difficult and sometimes impossible for the Allies to land, to resupply their forces from these port cities, because the ports had been destroyed and it took a very long time to repair them. And so the Red Ball convoys remained hugely important, because the Allies were only able to resupply, or for the most part, were only able to resupply by landing supplies at Normandy and sending them hundreds of miles by trucks to the east to meet up with their advancing forces. And this was a constant drag on the Allied advance, because transporting supplies that far was not efficient, and it meant that the Allied forces were often slowed because of inefficient supply lines. But the Red Ball convoys were the mechanism by which much of the supply, of the resupply for the advancing front lines was done. Welcome to the Ardennes Forest. So, I was just, we got paratroopers coming down. I was just telling you about how the Red Ball convoys were the resupply mechanism for the front lines, because the Germans had been destroying port cities as they would retreat. However, oh, Kilroy was here. That's a bit of graffiti that was done by the Allies as they would advance, and I think even put by spies and stuff as well. And it actually freaked out the Germans. They thought that it was some kind of spy network, or it was sort of, it became a little intimidating, I guess, to the Germans, or so the story goes. If you go to the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C., you can find a Kilroy was here symbol scratched into a little section of the memorial. Here we have a sarcophagus with a stone knight or something on top. Well, as I explore this ruined church, I'll finish my thought from earlier, which was about the Battle of the Bulge, because this map is set during the Battle of the Bulge, which was the last major German counteroffensive of the war. And part of why it was so important and why Hitler went against the advice of his generals and instigated the Battle of the Bulge was because by that point the Allies had managed to capture the city of Antwerp. And Antwerp was a large port city that had not been destroyed by retreating Axis forces. And what that meant was that the inefficient, sluggish, red ball convoys coming all the way from Normandy could be replaced and supplemented by resupply from Antwerp, from the port at Antwerp. And this was a huge boon to the Allied forces, who had been dealing with chronic supply shortages as they advanced east. And so, in a daring gamble to retake Antwerp and cut off the Allied supply lines, Hitler started a winter offensive in December of 1944. He launched the last of his military reserve forces at the American lines, who were taken completely off guard. They did not expect an attack from Germany during the winter. And the Germans began to punch through, and it formed a protruding front line. On the map of the front lines, it sort of formed this hump from the German side into the Allied side. And so this became known as the Battle of the Bulge, because of that bulging appearance on the map. Débarquement, les Alliés débarquement dans le nord de la France. Débarquement. Something it's a burned newspaper. Seems like maybe a headline about the Normandy landings, but that doesn't seem right that would be here this much later. But who knows? Could just be they didn't want to make a new asset for it, or it's just an old newspaper, who knows? We have a little water wheel here, and dumps the water into this little pipe, and then just kind of pours it on the shore. I wonder what the point of that is. So the Battle of the Bulge was eventually won on the Allied side, and it was the last gasp of German resistance, really. There was, of course, more fighting, but at that point, the race was pretty much on between the Allied forces in the west and the Red Army in the east to see who would reach Berlin first. Because the alliance between the Soviet Union and the rest of the Allies was always going to be it was always going to end with a competition between them, because they were not natural allies. And so, as it was becoming clear that it was only a matter of time before Germany fell, Joseph Stalin and the Allies' leaders saw the importance of reaching Berlin first to give them more bargaining power in the post-war political landscape. And also, I never finished my thought from earlier about the barrage balloons. The barrage balloons forced aircraft to fly higher up in the air to avoid being hit by the balloons. And the higher that an aircraft was flying, the easier that flak cannons and anti-aircraft guns had, the more easily they were able to hit those aircraft. Because anti-aircraft guns can only turn so quickly. And so, if aircraft are strafing low over the ground, then the anti-aircraft guns have a hard time rotating fast enough to keep a bead on them. But if they're high up in the air, then they don't have that problem. So barrage balloons were not, I don't know how many times planes would actually hit the balloons or the cables, but they forced planes up into the air where they were more vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire. Here we are in Gibraltar. We advanced from the beaches of Normandy all the way to the Ardennes Forest, and now we are sweeping back southwest to the tip of the Mediterranean Sea, where it meets the Atlantic Ocean. And famously, the Rock of Gibraltar overlooks this small stretch of water. He's listening and watching you. Careless talk costs lives. And they will say, "This was our finest hour," attributed just to the Prime Minister. Which is kind of funny. Or maybe it's not funny, I don't know. I guess I would just imagine a quote would say Winston Churchill, but I guess for the citizens of Britain, I guess it'd be like saying, the president has instructed us to blah 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 or whatever. Anyway, the Rock of Gibraltar overlooks the Strait of Gibraltar, and it has long been a strategically and economically valuable spot because Gibraltar Battery 1902 controlling the Strait of Gibraltar is very important because the amount of ships that pass through the strait is colossal. We have a deep pit here with some fire exploding outward from the fortifications. Perhaps a fuel depot underground or a munitions armory caught fire. And I talked in my recent Call of Duty 2 video, well, that's a cool name, Devil's Bellows. Devil's Bellows. I talked in my recent Call of Duty 2 video about the war for control of the Mediterranean during World War II. And how important it was in determining the fate of North Africa, and by extension the fate of Europe, because of course North Africa was used as a launching point into Italy. Gibraltar Royal Navy. see all these wounds and pockmarks on the buildings here. Signs of the fighting taking place in the area. Some planes strafing off in the distance, and the waters full of ships. So, this fortification guards the strait and is thus critically important to controlling the Mediterranean Sea. If you're interested in hearing a little more about the North African campaign, you can check out that last Call of Duty video I made. And that is the Rock of Gibraltar up there, overlooking, I guess that's the Atlantic disappearing off into the distance, because the rock is on the north, so that should be the Atlantic. And maybe I should talk a little bit about the game. I'm talking history again. I said this in the last video. I said I was probably talking. Oh, this is really cool. The cannons. Looks like an old pirate fort, or an old navy fort held against pirates or something like that. Great North Road. We have a lot of tunnels here leading off into deeper parts of the complex, and this tunnel fades into mistiness. But yeah, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. What am I saying? This is not Modern Warfare 2. Call of Duty World War II was a game that pulled me back to the series after I took a little break. I actually quite enjoyed this game. I thought it was pretty solid. I liked going back to the World War II setting, and it had some cool, unique features, like a sort of class-based system where when you created a class you had to choose a category first, like airborne, or armored, stuff like that, and it modified how you could build your class. Welcome to the London docks. We are looking out at the famous icon of London, Tower Bridge. And we find ourselves here in London during the Blitz, which was the bombing campaign carried out by Germany against Britain for much of the war. Initially carried out by the Luftwaffe, Germany eventually added its famous Vengeance rockets. The V1 rocket and the V2 rocket. Looks like we have a barge full of coal here that's currently on fire. And this is the River Thames, of course, the famous river that passes through London. And it's full of tugboats and barges and other ships. But yeah, as I was saying, Call of Duty World War II. Oh, this is cool. There's some ships in motion as well. I really like their map design in this game. I just think, I know I haven't been talking about it too much because I've been talking about history again, but I just think the maps are very beautifully designed. Very well made. Yeah, this game. Oh, here's a fun little bit. You can drop down here and kind of hop along the river. Looks like this is a barge full of wool. Thompson and Sons and Company. Thompson, Sons and Company. Import, export. So we'll check out this path here. I did enjoy this game. It had the monetization scheme that I don't like in modern gaming, which is, you know, lots of cosmetics to buy, and it had loot boxes and stuff. So this game came out during the peak of loot boxes, like Battlefront 2 famously was raked over the coals for its loot box system. I believe this game came out the same year as Battlefront 2, actually. I think they were both 2017 games. So, I didn't like that aspect of it, but that's so many modern games now. So it is what it is. But in terms of the gameplay, I quite enjoyed this Call of Duty. I really liked their war game mode, like Operation Neptune that I showed you earlier. Remember, if it is not on your punch card, it will not be on your paycheck. Is anybody still using these old-fashioned punch clocks? Is anybody still punching into work like this? I mean, obviously people are punching into work, right? A job I had a few years back, I had to punch in every time I showed up and left, so that's obviously still a thing, but I mean, it's a super common thing. But I'm just curious if anybody out there still uses those old-fashioned clocks. I'm sure there's no reason to. I'm sure nobody does. But yeah, I wonder who that guy is. I don't see any inscription on the base of his pedestal. So I liked this game. The war mode, as I said, I thought was especially fun. I really like objective-heavy game modes, where there's a sense of almost narrative progression and creative objective types. So, for instance, in the war mode, where you would have to escort a tank or, blow up German artillery guns, whatever it might be, and how it took place over a series of objectives, one after another. Notice, stay on job till whistle blows. Street. Here we have a Jeep ready to be shipped out to the front lines or somewhere where I suppose it'll be assembled on site. You've got some of London's famous red buses with advertisements plastered over it. Sensational beauty guarantee. Keep your eyes and ears open. Prevent sabotage by fifth columnists in the port and docks. Fifth columnists are spies, an enemy faction within your own people, hiding among your people. Greetings from Britain. Greetings from Britain. Laurie's sauce. Laurie's sauce. A kind of fun thing about this game too was it had a place called Headquarters where you would hang out in between matches. And there were little activities to do there, like there are these various parkour elements where you would hop around on obstacles to climb to otherwise inaccessible areas. And other players were just hanging around. Drink water, London Health Department. So you would hang out in the headquarters and interact with other people, other players. That's where you would call in your loot boxes, and everybody would see you call it in. So no doubt that was a strategy to try to get people to buy more loot boxes, because if you saw somebody call in something cool, you would get jealous and be more likely to buy it yourself. Entrance: fried bread with butter, eggs and bacon, potato cakes. What are you picking off the menu there? I'm an eggs and bacon guy. You're not going to catch me ordering the fried bread with butter. Not a chance. I might go for potato cakes. I could see that being like a 1/3 of the time I get the potato cakes, the other 2/3 I get the eggs and bacon. But you're never getting me ordering the fried bread with butter. And headquarters was cool too. You could challenge people to like 1v1 matches, and other players could watch you while you fought. There will always be in England. Gas masks. Gas masks. Always keep your gas mask with you at all times. Take care of it. Don't use it as a knapsack or pillow. How to put your gas masks on. Hold your breath. Hold mask in front of face with thumbs underneath the straps. Bring chin well forward into mask and draw straps back overhead as far as they will go. Make certain straps are not twisted. The edges of the face piece are not doubled inwards. In a gas attack, first put your own mask on, then you will be better able to help others. City of London. Okay. If England falls, you fall. Home defense. I don't think these are real propaganda posters. The characters on them are like, I don't know, they don't look real. They look like, I know that's how the Armored Division basic guy looks. And he's appeared on multiple of these posters. Prevention of consumption. Passengers are requested to abstain from the dangerous and objectionable habit of spitting. No spitting. No spitting in my saloon. No spitting, fighting, or cussing. No spitting, cussing, or fighting. course, Britain, sustained this long period of pain under the Blitz. And it was a constant sort of morale battle, right? This is where the keep calm and carry on saying came from, as the British knuckled under and bravely dealt with the constant bombardment of their cities. And now, let's pop over to another European city, another capital, Berlin. This is the map, Flak Tower. And isn't this a striking scene already? Bombers flying in formation high overhead, searchlights sweeping across the evening sky, planes whizzing through the air, anti-aircraft guns firing off in all directions. This tower here, this Flak Tower, is part of a handful of flak towers that were built by Germany to defend Berlin against, and in probably other cities, I don't know, but certainly there were a handful in Berlin to defend against Allied aerial attacks. And they are these massive, massive towers, these wide, brutalist pillars. And of course, they are topped with anti-aircraft guns. You can see how high up we are above the surrounding buildings and parks and trees. And these flak towers were kind of invulnerable to bombs and such. They are just made of such thick concrete that they were highly defended. And so they also served as shelters for local Berliners when bombings would come. You could fit thousands of people into these flak towers. And you can still see some of these towers standing today if you go to Germany. They've either been, I think some of them have been destroyed. Yeah, there's one right there, another tower. You can see the scale of it. Berlin stretching out in all directions. You can see the guns mounted up there. Just very stunning buildings. And what looks like a radar array or something here. But yeah, I think some of these have been dismantled in Britain, pardon me, in Germany. But some of them still stand, either repurposed or, just serving as kind of urban spots to climb up or explore, covered in, graffiti or whatever. Looks like this radar dish has been destroyed. See what I mean when I say I think these maps are just gorgeous? It's obviously a horrible sight if you take the reality of it, right? It's war and all these explosions and things, but they've made it very striking and very beautiful. Setting it at evening with the sunset turning the sky orange. Here we have the wreckage of a statue. Sort of a gargoyle perched on the Flak Tower. And we have a communications room or something in here. Lots of devices at the desks here. And of course, the tower is abandoned. Nobody here but us. Look at the size of these guns. You know, the technological innovation of World War II is just amazing. I mean, it always comes with the reality of the fact that it was, you know, war and the horrible pain of any war, much less the particular atrocities of World War II that make it so dark and disturbing, but the innovation as well, and the drive of, for instance, the Allied innovation of vehicles and things to overcome German defenses is just remarkable. If you go and look up these various vehicles and devices and stuff that they built, they just built all sorts of things that had never been made before. Like, you know, they would put these roller wheels on the front of tanks, stuck out in front of the tank, and it kind of looks like those long rolling devices when you go through a car wash, where it's spinning horizontally and whipping those big pieces of fabric all over your car to help clean it. So they would put something like that on the front of a tank, but they would put chains, big heavy chains on it, and then spin it really fast so the chains would just rip up the soil underneath. And it was an anti-mine device, because it would just carve into the dirt and rip up or destroy mines underneath, detonate them. And they built all sorts of ingenious vehicles for stuff like this. I mean, if the Germans blew up a bridge, they built bridge vehicles that would just drive into a hole, and the top of the vehicle would have a bridge on it, and so you would drive this tank down into a ditch, and it would unfold a bridge on top of it, and then vehicles could drive over the tank to cross the gap. Or other vehicles that would drive out onto the beach over terrain where tanks could not pass, because their treads couldn't pass over the ground material. Or trucks or whatever, if vehicles couldn't pass over it, they had a vehicle that would lay out like basically a carpet behind it, and then vehicles could pass over that as a path over the material that they couldn't normally drive on. So, anyway, I could talk about that a lot more in the innovation, and you know, when I talked about Operation Bodyguard earlier, don't think I emphasized how much I just am amazed by the inflatable tanks and fake aircraft and stuff that they built, because they would put them on tracks on the ground and roll them along so that it looked like, the tanks were moving to fool German reconnaissance. And anyway, I think I will wrap this video up here, gazing out at the grimly beautiful sunset sky of Berlin. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And until next time, my friends, I hope that you stay well. Goodbye. Goodbye.